So how does a movement with 10 million members, pretty much the entire nation, get crushed almost overnight? Well, that's the incredible story of Poland's Solidarity Union. We're going to break down exactly what happened back in 1981. Think of this as your ultimate revision guide for a really critical moment in the Cold War.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll set the scene with the power struggle that was brewing in Poland. Then, we'll get into the crackdown itself, martial law. After that, we'll dig into the government's official reasons for doing what they did. Then we'll zoom out and look at the bigger picture, why solidarity matters so much. And we'll wrap it all up with the key revision takeaways you need to know.
Okay, let's jump right into the heart of the conflict because this one chart says it all. Look at these numbers for public confidence right before the crackdown. It's staggering. Solidarity, the trade union, had the trust of 90% of the people. 90. The Catholic Church was right up there at 85%, and the ruling Communist Party, just 11%. This isn't just a gap, it's a chasm, a total split in the nation. So that huge gap in trust basically created a powder keg. On one hand, you had the official government, which almost nobody believed in. And on the other, you had this massive popular movement that really held the hearts and minds of the country. Poland was, in every sense of the word, a nation divided against itself. So you might be asking, why was Solidarity so incredibly popular? Well, this quote from a report written by its own members gets right to the point. It talks about this deep, burning sense of unfairness. Ordinary people were dealing with shortages of basic things like cotton in hospitals, while the party elites were living a totally different life. And was that feeling of injustice that fueled Solidarity's amazing growth? So here's the million-dollar question for your revision. How does a government with only 11% support possibly deal with a movement of 10 million people? Well, the answer came fast, and it was brutal. The state decided it was time to strike back, hard. And if you look at this timeline, you can see just how fast everything went downhill. Solidarity explodes onto the scene in August 1980. Just a few months later, by February 81, a tough military guy, General Jaruzelski, is in charge. And then, bam, by December, he brings the hammer down. The government declares martial law. Now, martial law is a key term you absolutely have to know. So what is it? Well, it's basically when the army takes over the day-to-day running of a country. The government hits pause on all the normal laws and uses military force to keep order. It's a really extreme move, saved for what they see as an extreme emergency. And the effects were instant and severe. The government's first move under martial law was to try and cut the head off the snake. The entire Solidarity organization was suspended. It was made illegal, just like that, overnight. And its leaders, including the famous Lech Walesa, were rounded up and thrown in jail. And we're not talking about just a few key arrests here. The sheer scale of this crackdown was huge. About 10,000 Solidarity leaders and activists were imprisoned. The message from the government couldn't have been clearer. This people's movement was now officially an enemy of the state. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. How does a government justify doing something so drastic? I mean, they couldn't just come out and say, hey, nobody likes us, so we're calling in the army. No, they had to create an official story. So let's take a look at their justifications. All right, reason number one. The government claimed Solidarity wasn't just a trade union anymore. Their argument was that it had started acting like a political party, that it was trying to set up its own government and grab power. So, in their eyes, Solidarity was a direct threat to the state itself. The second reason they gave was all about the economy. The government pointed out that Poland was in a terrible state. You had massive food shortages, prices were going through the roof. They argued that all the strikes and the instability being caused by Solidarity were just making a really bad situation a whole lot worse. They also made the case that Solidarity had become a victim of its own success. The argument went something like this. The movement was so huge with so many different groups inside it that its own leaders couldn't even control it anymore. It had become, from their perspective, this chaotic force that had to be contained for the good of the nation. And finally, there was the giant lurking next door. The Polish government insisted it was under massive pressure from the Soviet Union. The message from Moscow was basically, get your house in order, restore communist control, or we'll come in and do it for you. The threat of a Soviet invasion, like they'd done in Czechoslovakia, was pretty much the government's ultimate trump card. So that's the official story from the government. But let's zoom out. What's the deeper meaning of Solidarity? Why do historians think this movement is so important, even though it was crushed? Well, for starters, solidarity just blew the lid off one of the biggest promises of communism, that it would create a better life for working people. All the shortages, the inequality, the strikes, it showed the entire world that the system just wasn't delivering on even the most basic things. And it was about more than just empty shelves and shops. Remember that quote from the beginning about the two different kinds of hospitals? Solidarity dragged the inefficiency and the corruption of the communist state out into the light for everyone to see, not just in Poland, but all around the world. But maybe the most crucial takeaway is this. Solidarity proved that even a powerful, one-party communist state wasn't invincible. It showed that organized, regular people power, could actually pose a serious threat to their grip on power. And that sent a shockwave of hope to activists all across Eastern Europe. Okay, let's pull all this together into a nice, neat summary. If you're studying for an exam, this is the part you'll really want to lock in. We're going to boil down this whole conflict to its absolute essence. And this table just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have solidarity. Its power came from the people, that incredible 90% support, and from its moral authority. It was fighting against injustice. On the other side, you have the state. Its power was physical and external. It had the army, it had the police, and, crucially, it had the backing of a superpower, the Soviet Union. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on for your revision. Back in December 1981, the government definitely won the battle, no doubt about it. They crushed the movement. But did they win the war? Or, by showing the world that communism in Poland could only survive by using its own army against its own people, was this actually the beginning of the end? Something to think about.